Hello everyone, welcome to our April Lunch and Learn session. My name is George, I work in the comms team here at the council. I'll be hosting, but this session is going to be very much in the hands of Deborah Adams, the team manager for Looked After Children responsible for under 16s, and Laura Freeman, her counterpart who has responsibility for children seeking asylum and 16 to 25-year-olds. And feel free to correct me, Laura and Deborah, if I've not quite got your job descriptions right there. Thank you very much for joining us to hear about the council's role as a corporate parent, the responsibility we all have as employees, and lots of other things around corporate parenting. For anyone who hasn't been to a session before, as an attendee, you're not going to be on camera or microphone at any point during this, so you can just sit and relax. But you do have access to the Q&A box, so throughout the session, if you think of any questions or comments, please pop them in there. We'll basically do a Q&A bit at the end, but if there's anything sort of really urgent, we might interject. But also just to say the session is going to be recorded, so anything that you do kind of put onto that thing will be there, but you can post it anonymously. That is, I think, quite enough from me, so without any further ado I will hand over to Deborah, but first I think Laura.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura, team manager for the Child Asylum 16+ team. So we're here to talk today about corporate parenting, which we actually refer to as our family business, because when we're thinking about corporate parenting, we're talking about our young people who we are parenting, albeit corporately. So that is why we refer to it as the family business. So before we get started learning all about that this lunchtime, I'd like to ask a few questions for you. Can you guess how many young people that we are actually responsible for within Solihull? If you have any answers there, if you can pop them into the chat for us, and we will find out shortly how many we do look after as well. Any guesses so far? Okay. I'm going to hand over to Deborah then to talk you through how many we have.
Hello everyone, I'm Deborah Adams. I was on mute there. So I'm the team manager in the Looked After Children's team, and thank you everyone for coming today. So I wasn't sure if people were making guesses and I couldn't see it, but I understand from Laura that there weren't any guesses about our numbers. So
we have had a couple of guesses. Just
what were
Deborah,
they?
just to jump in. So
Okay.
Sorry.
we've got two slightly nice range really. Someone said 50 and someone said 350. So
Okay. Well, I'll keep you in suspense for a few more seconds and then I'll let you know. So one of the things I just wanted to help you understand really is so you know the children and the age groups. So I've looked at that as well, so that we know and understand effectively we talk about them as a group of children, what they look like. So overall, we have responsibility for 562 children who are looked after. At least that's the number at the time that we wrote this presentation. Sometimes that number can go up or down, maybe up to 10 children or more. Within the team that I manage, which is the Child Looked After team, there are 277 children, which we are responsible for. That might be around 280 today. So the largest cohort for us is children between the ages of 11 and 15. The second largest cohort are children between the ages of 6 and 10, and then our 1 to 5-year-olds. And within the Child Asylum and 16+ team, which Laura is the team manager for, there are 93 children and 16 to 18-year-olds also that they are responsible for, which 40 of that number are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And also within the Children's Disability Team, and Nikki is the manager for the Children's Disability Team, there are 35 young people who are looked after. So there are around 100 young people who are looked after within the Child Protection and Court team, and a further 10 children in the Child in Need teams, and 7 within the Child Assessment team. So that makes up that number. And so in addition to the above children that we've talked about, there we're also responsible for 373 young people who have left local authority care, and their ages are between 18 and 25. Okay, so thank you. So I just want to talk a little bit about the journey for children, and understanding, sort of helping you to understand, I suppose, the what the auspices are in terms of why they might be looked after, and a little bit about how that might happen for some children and what that journey looks like. So in terms of the Children Act 1989, so children can be looked after voluntarily, which is under Section 20. So their parents or guardian can agree to that voluntarily. Or Section 31, which is when there is a care order, or there can also be an interim care order. So the court would have been involved at that point, and an application would have been made, so that the local authority has those powers under those sections. So often young people will have experienced childhood abuse and trauma, or neglect, which we refer to. So we know those as adverse childhood experiences before they might become looked after. So that means that our young people would have already experienced some disadvantage in relation, or at least when you compare them to their peers. Sometimes young people will experience multiple changes of social worker as well, including multiple placements, and they might have lived with multiple foster carers. And sometimes young people are able to stay long-term with their carers, and form those bonds. So that can happen as well, which is something that we want to promote, because our goal for young people is to create as much stability and permanence, and to do that in child-focused timescales. So we are obliged to do that as quickly as we can, under the statutory guidance in which we work. So our ethic is to create those meaningful relationships, and that they could maintain into adulthood, and to support them to achieve the very, very best to their abilities. Okay, thank you. I'll hand you over to Laura now.
Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about 16 plus and leaving care. That's my team that I manage, Child Asylum and 16 plus team. So we work with young people aged 16 all the way up to 25, but we do have an eligibility criteria for young people receiving a service from my team. So here it sets out 4 criteria that they must meet in order to get a service from us. And ultimately, their service provision is down to the amount of time that they have spent in local authority care. So the first category is eligible. So when we refer to a young person as eligible, they are typically age 16 or 17. They might have been looked after for 13 weeks since the age of being 14, and one day past their 16th birthday, and they would still be looked after at this point. Now, if they are 16, 17, and they have been looked after for 13 weeks since the age of 14, and they have left care, we categorise our young people as relevant, and that's their care leaver status up until the age of 18. So this includes those who were placed upon remand, or those who were placed in secure children's home, although the difference with children placed on remand, which would mean that they would have done potentially something criminally, which has led them to be incarcerated, they will become looked after until they're sentenced, and upon sentencing or upon turning 18, their looked after status will then end. So if young people have attained the age of 18 and they are previously eligible or relevant, we categorise them at the point of turning 18 as former relevant young people. And from then they receive a PA service. Young people who have stopped being looked after before or on their 16th birthday, for example, those who are privately fostered, or those subject to a special guardianship order, or those looked after and have returned home, they will have a status of qualifying. The service level that they receive from my team only differs ever so slightly for those qualifying in terms of financial support, but primarily all the other functions that we fulfil within our team remain the same, such as pathway planning and helping and supporting our young people in practical ways as well. Next slide, please. So leaving care and beyond. So the age of 16 is a really important age for our young people. This is the age that they are beginning to be prepared for transition into adult life. So this includes thinking about where they're going to be living, what education, employment, training options that might be available to them, and the support that they're going to need in order to reach their full potential. This is a very worrying time for all of our young people. Our young people have lots of different thoughts and feelings around this time. Worried, frightened, scared, anxious, and also sometimes they can be quite excited to start their independent lives. But all of them require a lot of support at all stages of their journey through care. And it does take a village to raise a child, and into adulthood as well. So next slide, please. So I'm going to introduce to you a concept called corporate parenting. And there are 7 corporate parenting principles. So this is what in law we are asked to think about and asked to do. So the 7 corporate parenting principles are to act in the best interests and promote the physical, mental health and well-being of all of our children and young people, to encourage children and young people to express their views, wishes and feelings, to take into account their views, wishes and feelings, to help them gain access to and make best use of services provided by not just children's services, but all services in the local authority and beyond, to promote high aspirations and to seek to secure the best outcomes for children and young people at all stages, for young people and children to be safe, to have stability in their home lives, relationship, education or work, and finally the 7th principle, to prepare children and young people for adulthood and independent living. Next slide, please. So the corporate parenting principles do not exist in a vacuum, and so we refer to it as corporate co-parenting. So corporate parenting should shape the mindset and culture of every part of every local authority service in how it carries out all of its functions in relation to children who are looked after and are care leavers. Our young people, when asked, told us that they desire choice, stability and people who can relate to them and listen to them. And our young people want us to be able to do what we say we're going to do it in good timescales, avoid delay and keep them updated at all times. In order to corporately parent our young people, we do need help, and particular help in terms of the co-parenting, which has been mentioned above there. Okay, next slide, please. So you might be thinking at this point, how can you help and what do our young people actually need from you? So we have a principle of children's champions within children's services, and we would like to extend that out to other areas and other services too. So what we're asking for is each team to provide a service to look after children and care experienced young people, to have a dedicated person to support and promote the active involvement of those children and young people in service design, delivery and the ethos of corporate parenting within their teams. A children's champion ideally will ensure that individual team members develop a clear understanding of their responsibilities towards looked after and care experienced young people, create a supportive environment within their teams to allow ongoing creative discussions about how that support can be developed and delivered, to allow all staff members to develop skills and knowledge in this area of work and training, etc., and for them to support the work of corporate parenting team, which would be myself, Deborah, and wider others, across various projects that we might be approaching you for support in the future. A corporate parenting champion or children's champion will act as a link between their own teams and our teams and the wider council as well in terms of their corporate parenting duties, to enable a two-way flow of information about how we are corporately parenting and supporting our young people. Children's champions should ideally be practitioners who are keen to enhance their own practice and that of others as well. So if you think that that might be you, or you have someone in mind that is interested in doing that role, then please do let us know. Next slide, please. So if you have any other ideas at this point about how your services might be able to help us in terms of our corporate parenting duties, we would like to ask you guys to pop that into our Q&A chat. If there's anything at all that you can think of, we would love to hear your ideas.
Thank you, Laura. Just while we give people a chance to pop their ideas in on the support and pledges, because I think we've got, as we saw from earlier when you asked a question, we've got about a 10-20 second delay going on. So just while we wait for that, the champions, that's something you're looking for people to come forward to you to volunteer to be at the moment. And if so, is that just a case of emailing yourself, Deborah, and sort of sticking your hand up, or are you going out and recruiting for that?
So our email addresses will be at the end of this slide as well. So if you can email us with some suggestions, if it's not yourself and you have other people in mind, it doesn't have to be immediately today. But if you take it back to your teams and you have a think and you have an ask around, maybe present at team meeting to ask for support, do let me know, email me, and I will get the ball rolling for you.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and just sort of, and thank you both for the presentation. I've learned a lot. I joined the Children's Services team not too long ago, working on their comms, and it's still picking up new things, and it's interesting to learn sort of breadth of responsibility and breadth of things that the council does. So corporate parenting is another fascinating aspect of that. So thank you for that. I've certainly learned. Still waiting for anyone to sort of come in with any comments or thoughts, but I think we'll also take broader questions as well now, if anyone's got anything they want to put forward, as well as those comments and suggestions on support and pledges that your team might be able to offer. Which are you, Deborah and Laura, are you looking sort of, is this big ways, small ways, is this sort of anything that people might be able to embed into their current work? You know, if they're working in any way with children that you mentioned, is it sort of the smallest thing, or are we looking at like quite sort of big initiatives? What are you hoping to get from the kind of from people who are in these roles?
I think the first and foremost consideration really needs to be what would be good enough for our own children, and what would you do for your own children that perhaps you might think, is there somebody there doing that for our young people who we look after within Children's Services? So if that is the starting point, I guess we are open to any and all suggestions at this point. We are developing a mentoring service, so if you are interested in mentoring a looked after young person, then we'd love to hear from you as well. But it could be anything little to anything big project wise. So anything and everything goes, I think, at this point. The more support that we can offer our young people, the better, really. But we do need help from our wider partners to do that. Yeah,
right, thank you. And as you said in the presentation, it is, the responsibility of all of us at the council as corporate parents. So yeah, important people do get involved. We have had a question in. Richard asks, is corporate parenting any different for fostered children?
So fostered children are counted within the cohort that we've talked about today. So in essence, no, there's no difference. So they could either be in a foster placement, they could be living independently or semi-independently, supported accommodation. Some of our 18+ young people will have their own tenancies as well. So there's lots of different accommodation types that they would live in, and their support needs may differ depending on that as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment, which hopefully means you've answered everything anyone could want to know about corporate parenting in your presentation. But I will just give it a little bit more time in case anyone's got anything coming in kind of last minute. And if
can I just give some examples? Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't really know.
Of course you can.
Jump in. So,
jump in.
one of the things I think it's interesting to just reflect on is where there might be intersections, you know, between the department that you might be working for and the needs of our looked after children. So, you know, Laura would have a lot of examples, and so would I actually, of how, you know, responsibility for housing and things like that would intersect with the lives and needs of our looked after young people. So in my team, for example, we have children, young people who are looked after, but actually live with their parents in housing, for example. And a really nice example that I remember from my days when I was a social worker is, you know, think about the little things that you do for your own children or other children in your family, like helping them to install a curtain rail in their new flat, or, you know, little things like that were actually, you know, small things that we might take for granted within our family systems. We have to find how to provide that in a helpful and safe way for our young people. So there might be a little bit of creativity. And in terms of the champions from departments, you know, like I gave the example of housing, and you can see a really obvious need and relationship, but there might be others that, you know, we're still working on and trying to promote.
Thank you. We have had another question in. Anna says they'll put it to their next team meeting to nominate a champion from the SMBC housing team, which is good. You mentioned housing. What will be the support offer for the champions to develop their knowledge? So, what's the sort of what's the process, I think, and what they're going to learn?
Yeah, so we'd be happy to support with additional training where required. We do have children's champions meetings, and occasionally, I mean, essentially they'll be added to a mailing list, and there'll be opportunities available to volunteer their services. So things like, for example, supporting us with a celebration event, which is an annual event each year, where we celebrate the successes and the achievements of all of our young people. We do require quite a lot of staff involvement in terms of that. So there's lots of different things that go on through the year. So it'd be quite a varied role. So the training needs and the support around that will vary depending on what is available and what they want to get involved in. But essentially, if there's any support that you think that you do need as a children's champion, then speak to myself, speak to Deborah, and between us, we will offer that support as needed.
Thank you. And as added, it'd be good to have some examples of the existing corporate parenting offer across the council, or good practice elsewhere that you'd like to see implemented at Solihull. So, I mean, if there's anything you've got off the top of your head that you know, the good practice that can be shared, that would be great. Otherwise, I presume covered in the training that will be offered to the champions, and people can contact you.
Some examples that immediately come to mind, and they're not, Laura hopefully could add some as well. So, you know, like offering not work experience in some ways, you know, the things that other young people might have access to in the network of their family. You know, a friend of a parent works at a law firm, so they would, you know, they're interested in maybe becoming a solicitor, so they would shadow a day. Little things like that can be really valuable. There, I think that's the main one that stands out to me. But Laura, do you have any other examples of good practice or something that's been meaningful?
Well, we've had in the past, we've had offers of apprenticeships within various departments as well. So ring fencing apprenticeships and job opportunities for our young people. Other local authorities have, for example, made the title of care leaver a protected characteristic, which means that they would be guaranteed job interviews at a bare minimum. Not necessarily promised jobs specifically, they'd still have to interview, but that they're pushed up the list really to make sure that they are shortlisted to be given that opportunity. We've had adult services come through. They've been really helpful in terms of offering day in the life experiences. So again, along the lines of kind of work experience. So if they want to be a physiotherapist, they can go and shadow a physiotherapist for a day. It does just vary, it really does. And I say the biggest one that we're working on at the moment is a mentoring service, and then work experience attached to that, CV building. It's not just all about pushing education, employment and training, it is also about the softer stuff. I remember when I was a student social worker, I used to do some mentoring and also some work with looked after young people, tutoring. English, maths, that sort of thing, interview experiences. We would do activity days. It varies. Essentially, just ask yourself, what do I do for my own child or children? What do we have in Solihull? And if I'm not sure that's in Solihull, then maybe I can ask the question. And if it's not, then maybe that's something that we can start to do if it's agreeable, that we can do that.
Yeah, that's great. And so sort of it's a complicated thing to do to bridge the gap and the inequalities to care experienced young people, and you've got and thinking of it holistically, I think is important, and that that those champions will be great and will be a really good. There's so many aspects to it, and one I thought of, I've got a friend who runs a tailor's, and he provides suits to young people who need them for job interviews and things like that in that situation. So it's not, it is a very broad spectrum of stuff that we're asking people to do. And we've actually had one more question in, which is what's the time commitment? Do you have any idea of sort of how much time you're going to be asking these champions to put into the role?
That's a very practical question. I like that. It's probably different depending on what it is exactly, but I suppose the reality too is if it's something where there's going to be face to face with a young person, it's probably also about when, so they're probably in education or training or employment, in the same time that we are. So, it might be some weekend activity, but it probably depends specifically on the whatever that offer was, or that corporate parenting champion role was.
Thank you. Yeah, well, one that you probably work out the details of as you get into the process. So I can't see any more questions. So unless Deborah or Laura, if you've got anything you'd like to add in closing, then I will just wrap up and take the opportunity to inveigle people into our next Lunch and Learn. So thank you both. Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Laura. That was a really interesting presentation and good Q&A session. I think we covered a lot there. I just see the contact details have popped up on screen for Laura and Deborah. So if you are interested in those children's champion roles, then please do contact them, and any other questions, I'm sure, as well. Any thoughts that you come up with on the topic we mentioned, then please do get in touch. Our next session is going to be in May. It will be entitled Top Tips for a Sustainable Summer. Whether we have another heat wave like last year or flooding in the south of the borough again, both you and your home will be prepared after this session. Enjoying the summer is top of our to-do list, but little changes and preparations can make all the difference. And there may be a few ways that you can save money. So the sustainability team will be running that one. Look out for the registration link in all of the staff communications, and actually I'll just pop it in the chat before I close the meeting as well. We'll be sharing the recording from today's session in our Solihull and across the intranet, so do watch back if there's anything you want to see again, and please do pass it on to anyone who wasn't able to join us today. That would be really helpful. Spread the word. So I think that's worked. That might not have worked as a link, but it's all right. I'll include the link for the next one when the recording goes out and everything. So yeah, just in closing, thank you again, Laura. Thank you, Deborah, and thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for your time, and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.